He's wet. He's yellow. He's back.
Are you ready, kids?
Hello, it's Employee a Million, and welcome back to SpongeComs, Season 2 edition. If you're new to my channel, SpongeComs is a series of commentary tracks I make for SpongeBob SquarePants episodes as they turn 20 years old, or as their production finished 20 years ago, because from here on out, it starts to get a bit more complicated because I might do these earlier than they were completed or aired. Point is, it's time to celebrate Season 2 for its 20th anniversary coming up, starting with my commentaries on Season 2, Episode 1, Episode 21 in full order, Your Shoes Untied, and Squid's Day Off, both of which originally aired on February 17th, 2001, and both were written by Walt Dawn, Paul Tibbitt, and Meriwether Williams. And the first one guest stars Ween, one of Stephen Hillenburg's favourite bands, but more on that in a bit. Can I just appreciate this little adult joke they started the season with? The 90s were known for risky jokes, but SpongeBob's first fully 2000 season proves, the next decade could have its risky moments too. But a big change they made to SpongeBob in its second season was they switched from the traditional cell animation that was used for the pilot in Season 1 to digital ink and paint. This was becoming industry standard around this time. A lot of shows like The Angry Beavers and, not Ed and Eddie, the Powerpuff Girls, Dexter's Lab eventually. A lot of these big classic shows from the same era as SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, if we're counting the Oh Yeah cartoons as part of it, were converting from cells to digital, and it was a bit of a rocky road for some of them. Some shows like The Simpsons and Ed, Edd n Eddy experimented a bit with it. Ed, Edd n Eddy used it for the title sequence. The Simpsons did an episode here or there digitally, though those waited until the technology was perfected until they went digital. And I believe it's because maybe doing it on cells was harder. It was easier to make mistakes. It wasn't as ethical to have people in sweatshops do it. Having the Koreans do it on computers is probably a little more efficient, a little more modern. Don't want to get political or anything. This is a SpongeBob episode about tying your shoelaces. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that this was still pretty early on in the transitional process for the television industry. And you can definitely see it with this episode. Sources, as far as I know, date the beginning of this episode's production to around March of 2000, because that's when SpongeBob's Season 2 model sheet is dated. Like, the models in these very early episodes are a little all over the place. Sometimes they look more like Season 1, sometimes they look more like Season 2 and 3. It's a bit rough at points, but hey, it doesn't bother too many people, and it certainly wouldn't bother children, especially in the 2000s when they still mostly watch TV on CRTs. And another small difference, well, smaller than big animation change for Season 2, is that most of the staff stay the same, but they were given different roles. I mean, there were new staff members like Dan Povenmire, who eventually created Phineas and Ferb, Milo Murphy's Law, and some other show he's currently working on. Hope he doesn't turn into Butch. But some staff roles were shifted around. Sherm Cohen turned from a writer into a supervisor for the animation, and Andrew Overtomb was the animation director, I think, for the following episode, Squid's Day Off. So, things were changing for SpongeBob, but hey, probably for the better, because Season 2, 20 years on, still my favourite season of the series. Now, about the story of this episode, I do really like it, because even though it's a little hard to believe that SpongeBob, ostensibly treated like a young adult, would have trouble trying to tie his shoelaces, I mean, fair enough, he's never tied them before in his matured life. We see a little bit of him as a little speck. Think about SpongeBob's demographic, though. Most of them were children from the age of around 5 to 8 years old. The show was originally rated TVY until around 2007, so obviously some younger children, much younger, would have been watching as well. And usually kids don't learn how to tie their shoelaces until they're around 6 years old, so hey, this is a perfect episode to teach them why not having their shoes tied is a bit of a hindrance to their lives, but also teaches them how to do it at the end, after a lot of little cartoony shenanigans about it, which is a good thing about this episode. It's not only very entertaining, it's very helpful. And even though this is a very long gag where not a lot happens and you can kind of see the flaws in the early digital process, I do like this big running gag, well, not running, walking gag of SpongeBob inching his way forward, because it's got a very classical payoff. And oof, SpongeBob can look a little off-model sometimes. Well, on-model for Season 1 standards, but new animation style. And we are currently in the middle of one of the biggest paradoxes of pre-movie SpongeBob. If you remember, in Rock Bottom, SpongeBob could tie his shoelaces, but he can't in this episode. Fair enough, that episode might be set after. It also teaches you how to tie your shoelaces if you listen. Here, Squidward is eating a bunch of Krabby Patties, a little too much. Maybe lay off this much satire around the fast food business. However, in Just One Bite in Season 3, he says he's never had a Krabby Patty in his life. Maybe he's never been force-fed a Krabby Patty in his life. I don't know, I just find it interesting that this episode is the halfway point between two contradictory jokes and setups. Like, it proved that although Season 1 had some introductory episodes, SpongeBob has always had very flimsy continuity for characters. It's not about character development at all, it's just about giving you funny gags. They've had more continuity recently, but it's just episodic, cartoony shenanigans, and yeah, this episode pulls it off very well. It's got a great escalation too, because yeah, I needed to see that. Also, this might be the first time the Chum Bucket is referenced, but not seen. Goes to show just how much of a big issue it's becoming for them. And yeah, what was I going on about? Yeah, escalation. At first, SpongeBob doesn't know how to tie his shoes because, well, he embarrasses himself in front of Patrick. Then he starts messing up orders. Then his job is on the line. And then things get even more complicated when he realizes that most sea creatures don't wear shoes. I don't think that many sea creatures wear shoes in real life, but you never know with all the pollution going around. I like this little, I don't know if it's a meta joke, it's more of an observation about how the show is, how it was designed. It's more, this is a quirk of SpongeBob as a character in the SeaWorld. Let's take advantage of it. Something else I noticed about this episode, oh my gosh, those jellyfish are so transparent. They aren't that transparent later on. Something else I noticed is that there are a grand total of 3 live-action cutaways. There's the sea anemone at the start that I don't want to go too far into. There's the cut back to SpongeBob as a little baby speck sponge. And then there's the great return of Painty the Pirate. I think this is his first time appearing in an actual episode. They show him a bit more often later on, especially terrifyingly in the 4D ride. But I like that that's a more meta joke. Season 2 was definitely happier to tell bigger jokes that were more referential about the series itself, which you don't usually get in a second season. You typically wait until your 3rd or 4th for people to catch on, but people caught on to SpongeBob pretty quickly. Oh, and about Brian Doyle Murray's appearance as the Flying Dutchman here. I can kind of get why he is like a notch tire. I like that his bag says Souls. It's easier to see in digital ink and paint. But I like how he appears outside of an episode related to horror or piracy, because that's what... or the Undead, because his 3 appearances, well, 2 appearances and 1 cameo in Season 1 were all about who he was as a character. Now he can just appear into an episode, creating monkeys. And I like that. They don't usually use him often outside of episodes starring him, as is the nature of guest stars. Shopping List is the only one that comes to mind. But, yeah. Oh, also, very good foreshadowing for Shanghai. He's got a little ghostly sock he puts at the end of his tail. Little do we know that's his dining sock. Now, this ending here is a bit of a cheat. Like, I didn't know that Gary had legs. I mean, I just reviewed an episode where he did not have legs initially. Plus, I also find it a little jarring that they switch to the room being lit up a bit, but SpongeBob's color palette is still for nighttime. I like Gary's little rule there, though. But it's completely made up for with the song by Ween, which tells you exactly how to tie your shoes, which I'm 19, the show's 20, it's 2 years older than me. I'm 19, I don't need it, but kids in SpongeBob's demographic do. And I've listened to a couple Ween songs. This is a bit more chill than their usual stuff, but it was one of Steven Hillenburg's favorite bands, if not his absolute favorite. And they weren't the most popular band at the time. They weren't Nirvana or anything. However, I am pretty happy that they got a big break. They got a big fan who made a big show, and they made a good song and a very good episode. I do have some issues with how it ends, story-wise, and the animation at points. Some of this just seems like beta testing in the song. But overall, I think that this is a very cute episode, and it aims for a younger demographic than most other episodes, but it's really good at doing that, and this song is a very fun way to end the episode. So, yeah. Let Squid's Day Off begin. This is one of my 10 favorite episodes of the season. I might talk about that in a later video. But yeah, this is a really good episode. Same writers as the previous one. Again, Transparent Jellyfish, they fixed that later. Same writers as previously, Walt Dawn, Paul Tippett, and Meriwether Williams. Andrew Overtomb was a big part of the animation in this one. He still works on the show to this day, so goes without saying that this is one of the zanier pre-movie episodes, animation-wise, especially towards the end. But it starts on the old slow day at the Krusty Krab, which I have ragged on a lot, but in this case, it fits with the plot, and it's very funny because they make a big deal about how no one's around, nothing's happening, but Squidward's still yelling, SpongeBob's still bothering him, there's still a lot going on, there's a lot of kinetic energy. And they really start to ramp up Mr. Krabs' love of money, because he really wants his nickels and dimes to be cleaned. Don't know exactly why, but hey, maybe he's just a perfectionist in this episode. And the way they get Mr. Krabs injured, so Squidward has to take over the Krusty Krab for the day, pretty wild, I won't deny. Hopefully now that I don't have much to say about the story for the next wee while, you can admire my new SpongeCombs logo. I thought the old one looked a little too much like the show, so I redesigned it. So anyway, one thing I really like about this opening is that even though it's still constantly, like, yelling and stuff, there is still escalation here, and a very big payoff with all this crap landing on Mr. Krabs' head. Don't know why it was on there, who knows. And it gets to the point where you don't really care about the little jokes. Like, you absorb them, you find them hilarious. Mr. Krabs saying there's 10 good reasons to never let go of a dime. SpongeBob saying that Mr. Krabs' arms have fallen off again. I can completely understand why Mr. Krabs would be okay without his arms. I mean, he is a former pirate. He has worked in the Navy to some degree, as a chef still, but it's probably the most dangerous place for your arms on a naval boat, when you think about it. Of course, all that backstory stuff comes later. For now, let's just enjoy an episode about Squidward being a bit of a toy for the creators. Now, I think that this episode is a very good extension of these two characters' wants and desires. Squidward really wants to get the heck out of the Krusty Krab so he can enjoy his life, as we already know, and SpongeBob just wants to spend more and more time there, as we know. And something that will always stick with me about this episode is that SpongeBob is wearing two Krusty Krab hats for nearly the whole thing. It's a very good way to know, it's a very good way to identify the episode, and it strikes me as a bit of a convenience or a coincidence that this is Season 2, Episode 2. And in production order, it would have been 2B, but A. I wouldn't call it a very quintessential SpongeBob episode. He isn't really doing much. And I wouldn't exactly call it a quintessential Squidward episode, but it's pretty dang good for both of them. Because, like Pizza Delivery, this is another very good exercise in Squidward caring about SpongeBob. Of course, he doesn't want to be around SpongeBob, but he's still, like, looking out for him as the manager of the day. This part doesn't really make too much sense to me. SpongeBob needs to be told how to run a cash register, but he can count with money seamlessly. Maybe he's anti-materialistic, but who knows. Anyway, the meat and potatoes of this episode. The old imagination spots. I like how ridiculous they are. Like, of course, SpongeBob resting wouldn't cause a fire, but maybe SpongeBob loves Patrick enough to just give him a wad of cash. Again, I don't want to keep explaining the jokes, but these are very good jokes, and they do deserve mention. This is also one of the last times that they really play with the music. Like, they play it in reverse during Squidward's first imagination spot, and then they slow it down when he realizes, okay, this is ridiculous. And another thing, apart from the old Squidward cares about SpongeBob, is that he's actually doing his job as a manager. Like, that's great irony. He's looking over SpongeBob, he's constantly rushing back to the Krusty Krab, and he's constantly giving SpongeBob little advice. That's fun. Now, when I was younger, I always thought that SpongeBob constantly asking Squidward if he finished those errands, or finished those errands, I always found that a bit annoying, but hey, I'm kind of happy with it now that I'm older and understand it better. Now, this last little imagination spot is probably the best thing ever. One of the very best jokes of Season 2, in my opinion. Like, you don't expect that. It just comes clean out of nowhere. We've got this big old rushing montage now. I've said nearly everything I've wanted to say about this episode for the first two acts. I guess something else I could add is that I really liked it in the first two seasons whenever they added some rock music, or for their chase scenes, or their big running around sequences in this case. I feel like episodes like Life of Crime, did that have one? I don't remember. And No Free Rides in particular, oof, that is also another very beta testy look for the digital animation, that little vortex there. But yeah, the rock music, not a vital component of the SpongeBob canon. I feel like since this season they've been totally okay with just using fast-tempo Hawaiian music. Ooh, here we start to get to see Squidward going nuts. Can't use the C word anymore because some people do have a bit of a problem with it. SpongeBob, don't rub your caps like that. Something I never noticed about this until I read the SpongeBob wiki is that Squidward's skin is darker when he's all nutso. And I think that they reused this face in the Season 6 episode, Suction Cup Symphony. But yeah, I never noticed that he was a grayer skin tone here. Maybe it was just that effective at displaying his neurosis, that he's a little more washed out, more tired. Hey, running to and from Krusty Krab will do that to you. And again, this is good old playing with SpongeBob's mannerisms, the laugh, the design. He does kind of look like a toilet, as you can see in my thumbnail. But then we get to the bigger climactic moments of this episode, and I feel like we're going inside Squidward's head a bit. Like, he just flat out turns into a more realistic octopus when he's underneath the bath. Don't know why, it just fits. And then we've just got a lot more zaniness. We've got Patrick being totally okay with Squidward streaking. Squidward streaking. And then we get the big reveal that SpongeBob and Squidward didn't even need to work because it was a Sunday and they had the closed sign up. It was the show kind of flip-flops over whether or not the Krusty Krab is never open on Sundays or if it's sometimes open on Sundays. Episodes like this and SB129 heavily imply that it's closed on Sundays like most other businesses. But yeah, it's a nice little way to leave you with another joke, because it is cooling down a bit now as Squidward realizes just how silly he's been. And for some reason, that animation of Squidward's face deflating always reminded me of E.T., especially this picture on the title screen of the Atari game. Maybe that's not a good comparison. That shot right there, that's how you close an episode. Anyway, on to question of the week. 6 months ago, I asked you what your favourite Season 1 moments were. Super Seal writes, anchovy scene probably. The anchovy scene from Help Wanted, I assume. Jack McGinn, firmly grasp it! From Jellyfishing. Not the biggest fan of that episode, but that is a very good moment. And Cartman TV, best Season 1 moment, SpongeBob's pizza song from Pizza Delivery. I don't really have an answer. The Season 1 moment that sticks out to me the most is Squidward throwing the pizza in the guy's face as a way of getting back at him for yelling at SpongeBob. That is excellent. That, keeps me invested in those characters still. My question of the week for you this week is thoughts on the digital ink and paint episodes of SpongeBob. Do you like it more than the Cell episodes? Do you think it's more soulless? Do you think that it allowed them more possibilities? Let me know. And next week, we're going to look at the foul odor in Something Smells and the oppressive assertiveness of Bossy Boots. They're both pretty good episodes, but they don't have nothing on this. Sorry. Goodbye for now.